Start with some play memories. So I don't want to lose my audience just as I've started, but if you don't mind just closing your eyes gently, relaxing, just thinking back to when you were about 8, 9, 10 years old. And where was your favourite place to play? If it was a lovely May day and you got away early from school, where did you head to? If it was a Saturday morning and the sun was shining and you were thrown out of the house and told not to come back for tea time, where did you go? Where did you want to go? So I want you to come back to, I don't have a lot of time, otherwise I'd get you to engage with each other about where your favourite place to play was. I just want you to have a focus on where that was. And just do a wee bit of feedback just now. Put your hands up if your favourite place to play was outside. It tells me something about your age more than anything else at this stage, okay? So, were you in or near running water or in a risky place? Would that be your favourite place to play? Okay, just what I have. And were you exactly where your parents thought you might be? Was everybody where the parents were? No, right. And were you supervised? Nobody was supervised in their favourite place to play. What's really interesting about this exercise is when you do it with young people, particularly young parents, their favourite place to play normally is inside. And when you do it with young children, I did it with cup packs recently, and their favourite place to play was inside, except for one boy who loved playing outside on his bike. Their favourite place to play was inside, supervised, and exactly where their parents thought they were going to be. And when I was saying to them, there was an older audience who had near Kilmarnock, they'd all been playing in the viaduct and the rivers there. And when I said, look what you're missing out on, isn't that dreadful? No. They had no aspiration inward or ambition to be outdoor and roaming and having fun in the woods near the viaduct, near the river, or somewhere where their parents didn't think they were. And I think that's very telling and feeds very nicely into Bill's narrative. We've had a cultural shift in our society. We've had a cultural shift on risk. We've had a cultural shift, I think, on acceptance of the way things are. And I think the way to change things, and I'd be much more optimistic than Bill is through community action. And I'm very optimistic that we're seeing a huge resurgence in community action back in Scotland again. That we did have in the 80s before that big surge, and I can see lots of evidence to suggest that we've got a policy support crutch to help us in that community action that we haven't had traditionally in Scotland. That's not a political statement, by the way. So Play Scotland, I don't know how easy it is to read the slides at the back there, but we're a small national charity. We work with lots of partners very collaboratively. We do a lot of work in the early years, not because we think play is only for the early years, but it's where a lot of our policy success has been. It's where there's a lot of fantastic initiatives going on now in the early years in Scotland. But we're very much working with all age ranges. Very interestingly, in Lewis, the Isle of Lewis, when the local GP had a family and she realised there was no play opportunities, just going down to the beach or roaming about, on the land wasn't really what the children were looking for. She campaigned and she successfully raised money to develop a play park up in Lewis. And the council took it on and said that they would maintain it. So then, a few years later, they were trying to get more money for more equipment, and they had a survey of who was using the park and the playground and what they were using it for. And just as almost an incidental thing, they had the age range on it, to see what age. And because of that awful thing that people think only certain people of certain ages can play on certain equipment. There used to be bylaws, you would see it in Glasgow parks, only under 8s on this equipment, only over 12s on this. And what they were shocked to learn in Lewis was a third of the people who used the play park were over 65. And that very much reflects community in action. It's who's taking the children, who's going with them, who's out for a walk, who's trying to keep fit and well. And so that was taken into account when they planned it. And I was actually speaking at a conference a couple of years ago and telling that story, and there was somebody really engaging with me in the audience and nodding their head, and she came up to me at the end and she said, I was that GP. Oh dear.
You just talk on.
I'll just talk on. There's some nice images here to go with what I'm saying, so I hope we get some power back. Oh, that's changing. Okay. Well, I will, because I can back to show.
I grew up in Lewis.
Oh.
And council obstruction of children's playing is not a new thing. Because in Snorley they used to lock up the swings on Sunday so nobody could use them every single Sunday.
I think there's
That
a
was
fun
the pre-church influence, of course.
Yes, I think there was a cultural norm that people conformed to. Do you know, even if you weren't part of that culture, if you weren't one of those church-going people, you accepted that was the way things had to be. And I think that's, I would have theories about inequality, not what I'm here to talk about, but if I say this about inequality, one of the things, I'm from Scotland, I know I've got a strange accent, so I'm from Scotland originally, just to pave my history for the first 25 years, lived in Hill Head Street for 3 years, when I was a student, did my postgraduate in Edinburgh, lived in Northern Ireland for over 20 years, worked in community services there, and inherited a play portfolio eventually. And what was very interesting, I remember having this conversation, I was just about to go off and have twin boys as I was turning 40, you know, and it was just, well, I was at this meeting with the NHS and we were talking about teenage pregnancies, and at that stage in my mind I was thinking, you know, there's a lot to be said about teenage pregnancies. You've got the energy to have the babies and one after them and stuff. But anyway, the issue of travellers came up on a more serious note, and we were reflecting on the fact that we in community services had started making provision for travellers in a community sense, as opposed to we used to provide the sites for them. And I was bemoaning the fact that this is not what I'm here to talk about, I just can't help because I think it's so much part of this narrative. There was a whole feeling in the travellers that you had to try and understand the culture, and to do that you would maybe engage with travellers and educate them the way we had. So we had traveller community people going through diplomas in community work and youth work, and we thought that was part of the solution, that they could in some way come into our culture through their own people, and then we would be able to transform their culture to a culture that we find much more acceptable. And what we were reflecting on at this particular meeting was that absolutely nothing we ever did to the travellers worked. You know, the mortality rates were as bad as ever, the inoculation rates were as bad as ever, nothing was actually working that we did. And I had recently bought 2 double-decker buses that Voluntary Services Belfast were selling, and when they realised I was trying to buy them for the travellers' site, it was by the side of a road where there was no play facilities, and all the travellers' caravans were linked together onto the mains, so one strike of lightning and the whole caravan, you know, would go. So I've got these 2 these Voluntary Service Belfast play buses that were past their proper use, sell-by date, but were fit for purpose and better than nothing. And I was so excited, and I was taking some of my bosses out to see these buses and see the kids playing on the buses and all these classes we were going to run in these buses. And the community worker that we trained up and paid to do this diploma in community work had actually sold the 2 buses by the time I got there. So the other reflection we're having at this slightly depressing meeting, it's very easy to get yourself caught in a very depressing cycle of conversation, was we were reflecting on the fact that we'd spent, when you look at the travelling community in Northern Ireland, it comes down to almost about 4 families. There's lots, it's about 4 families. And we worked out we'd spent about £500,000 per family. And we hadn't improved anything. Not even our relationship and understanding of how we could work together with them. Now, fast forward then to last week, I was in Postle Park, and we were talking about open spaces and things like that, and some people there, we were talking about funding, and somebody was saying to me that in Raploch, in Stirling, they had worked out that it was equivalent, the funding that had gone into the Raploch was the equivalent of £10,000 per family, and yet nothing was improving. So we really had a great conversation to have to take the bill, is that money isn't just the answer here. There's more than that. There's cultural shift that has to happen, and there's other factors that need to come into play. And that's not to say that we shouldn't try and reduce that inequality. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying sometimes we need to try and think beyond the norm, get out of our way of thinking, think outside. I know it's corny to say think out of the box, but we're such an intelligent society. Why can't we actually get our heads around what these solutions are? Anyway, I'm here to talk about play and not property really. Well, part of it is about property, honestly. So what I'm here to talk about, I just want to be clear about this at the start. I'm talking about fun, flexibility, challenge, non-productivity, uncertainty. Fantastic document if you're interested in anything I have to say today. General Comment 17, UNCRC, just Google it. And it's a fantastic narrative about what are the barriers to play and who and really what the issues are, and really distills down in a very simple language because all the references are in a separate document, so it makes it very easy to read as to why children don't play and what the barriers are across the world. And very similar to some of the slides we've seen here, the correlations are fascinating to look at. The same barriers are in third world countries that are in our countries, in developed countries, undeveloped countries. The narrative is very similar as to what these barriers are and solutions about how we can overcome them. Place Scotland, we're a small national organisation. We're based in Strayton in Edinburgh. I just happen to live in Strayton in Ayrshire, the only 2 Straytons in Scotland. And we work locally with groups when we can, capacity of 4 people. We work across Scotland level. We really are a policy lobbying organisation, and we have a UK perspective because we work on with the Health and Safety Executive on children being able to take more risks, because health and safety is not a devolved matter. We work on a world level because of international work that gets done on Article 31, which is United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and Child's Right to Play. So just a wee bit about who we are, where we fit in. This is not what I'm here to talk about, and I'm using this to try and convey the traditional paradigm about play, that it was all to do with education, and it was something children had to do to learn. This is what play was actually about. And I loved sending this to Councillor Sadiq recently in Glasgow, because she's a chemistry teacher, science teacher. And what we are about is trying to design children into communities rather than out of communities. So we were familiar as kids with the no ball game signs, but there's more than that. You know, children are actually designed out of communities, and if you get a play space, if you're lucky, it can be the bit of ground that can't be drained, that wasn't big enough to put a house on, it's on the fringes of the community, it's not at the heart, it's not what the community ever articulated they wanted, it certainly isn't anything fun for the kids to do. Now this is an American slide, and I find it very interesting. It actually reminds me of the Glasgow Play Strategy. And the reason it reminds me of the Glasgow Play Strategy is when it was launched a few years ago and they had consulted with children about where their favourite place to play was, 90% of the children in Glasgow that were consulted said it was school playgrounds. So the obvious question for me to ask them is, well, what do you do during the school holidays? Do you climb the fence and go in? Oh, no, that was not what they did. Well, what do you do? Well, we go to our mates' houses and we sit inside and play games inside. So we've got these fantastic facilities sitting there all summer long during the holidays, and kids sit inside. So something has gone sadly wrong in the community. And this is what we're heading to. Do you know, there's a whole cultural shift, and we're just almost sleepwalking into it unless something significant can happen. I wanted to make a point here. Yes, I just wanted to divert a minute to say this, and I think it goes quite nicely with this slide, because we all know that if something goes wrong with this, I'm going to start looking for the youngest person in the room and say, can you come and sort this out? So the kids are good at technology, let's give them that, and it's fantastic that they aren't as scared of it as people of a different generation like mine are. But I just wonder how many people in the room might have said once or twice, under their breath, out loud, even in the last week, you know, children grow up so fast nowadays compared to when we grew up. Has anybody ever even thought that? Look how fast the young ones are growing up compared to us. And I would like to suggest something actually very different. I would like to suggest to you today that actually our children are less independent, less mature than we ever were when they were 8, 9 and 10. I would suggest, and I think a good example to give evidence of that is the Sheffield. You can Google this and go and look at Sheffield Right to Roam, or Roaming in Sheffield, or something it's called. But what they did at, I think it's Sheffield Hallam, they did a study, and in 4 generations what they were able to map was the great-grandfather, aged 8, was allowed to travel 6 miles to go fishing. Right down the generations to the great-grandson, so it's the great-grandfather to the great-grandson, who is allowed by his parents 10 years ago, I think it is, it might be 20 years ago, it might be in the 90s, to go to the end of his street as an 8-year-old. But actually the reality is that most children of 8 are not allowed to go out the gate. If they have a garden gate, they're not allowed beyond the gate. without somebody going with them. So that is, so really what we've got almost is the first generation of mankind to be reared in captivity. And that has huge implications, and not just against the narrative that Bill was giving us this morning, but it is about the creativity, it is about the health, it is about the mental well-being of our generation growing up behind us, or serving behind us. Okay, and I'm not going to go down, I think Bill's done a really good reality check for this morning, because I don't want to depress people too much, but you can't stress how important play is as part of the solution for so many things that are going wrong, that are not giving children a good childhood that in a wealthy society they should be enjoying, I would argue. So I've just picked a few here, but we know there's a type 2 diabetes epidemic in our 4-year-olds. We know that, lots of depressive, I'm going to just pick another one here. But the ones I've got there about obesity, depression, myopia, osteoporosis or ADHD. The other one in Scotland is rickets. You know, we have rickets prevalent across Scotland now. It's not just where you might be expected, and it's not really where it used to be in Scotland either. And I would make this play about poverty and play, and a poverty of childhood that our children have, but it's not confined to the traditional disadvantaged, less well-off communities. It's actually universal. It's happening across all the social strata in Scotland. So it's quite nice to have very Scottish-specific statistics, not to make it even more depressed on a nice sunny morning, but it's very interesting as to what the barriers are. Do you know, parents not letting the children out to play is probably the biggest barrier. It's not traffic. We have less road traffic accidents involving children than we ever had, partly because they're not out playing, partly because they're not out on the streets. We have no more accidents in playgrounds. I think there's a fatality once every 3 years across the UK. And that's despite millions being poured into rubberised surfaces in our playgrounds. The accident rate actually goes up when you do that, because kids and parents think they want to bounce, they don't bounce, they get long bone fractures. But actually, fatalities in playgrounds are sitting there as one every 3 years. Child abductions, extremely rare. These hard statistics tend to stay quite static. Yet we are a very fearful society. And I would add to Bill's narrative this morning that one of the reasons that I think that those graphs seem so immutable and intractable is that the role the media plays in making us fearful and making us behave in a certain way. Do you know, and I would say that as a parent myself of children that is more fearful than I know the statistics tell me. Now, I'm not bored with graphs, but I can show you a graph there. You know, if you want your kids to have an accident and end up in AE, get them signed up to rugby. That's number one. Do you know? You want them to have an accident, you want to go down and meet all the nice friendly staff at A&E and while away a day or two down there. Rugby is the activity. A playground sits way right down, you know, in between fishing and sailing and things like that. We have children playing out as something that is a risky activity, and yet, how many people would just open the door now and say to the kids, away out and play? This is not a phenomenon unique to Scotland, and very similar to what was being shown on the maps earlier there. This is actually a poster from Singapore, and one of those kind of things that I was showing you earlier about these really serious consequences of children not getting out to play anymore. And this is across the Western world and Asia now, is that children don't get a long division. I think that's gone as well. Actually, people don't get long vision by going out and looking at horizons anymore. That is how you develop your vision. There's a critical stage. If there's any opticians in the room, they can say this better than I can. But they need to go outside and look outside to actually develop your eyes. So what's happening in Singapore, in China, and in Scotland is that we have this massive crisis of myopia. So more and more children haven't got their eyesight properly developed, and they are resorting to glasses at a very young age. So that is a trend across the Western world. And this is a poster from Singapore, and basically what it's saying is, you know, spend more time on ball games, walks, fun on the playground, other outdoor activities every day, and less time on computer games, handheld games, because it is all that that's going on. Do you know, I'm not saying that a lot of these games that you can get now and a lot of the IT, there's anything wrong with. It's the balance isn't right. You know, that's fine, but you need to be going outside as well for health reasons. Not just your sight, but for mental health as well. One of the biggest champions of children's play and anti-poverty in Scotland is the former Chief Medical Officer, Harry Burns. And he was very clear that investing in children's play from an early age, but right through, was something you could do to improve children's health and well-being. And really, I mean, really for babies, pre-baby onwards, there's a lot of work now in Scotland with the Early Years Collaborative, so if you're interested in that, it's very, very interesting. And that engagement that we need to have with babies as soon as they're born. He calls it serve and return. So the baby smiles at you, you smile back. Baby smiles back, you smile back. As simple as that. That interaction from day one is play, and that is where child development starts. And that's where the brain development starts as well. So that's serve and return. I think if any of us as parents have realised how important it is, we wouldn't have paid so much attention to trying to keep the house in order. I had to give up eventually because I had 5 children, twin boys at the end, and everything was soaking or broken, you know. But for a long time I tried to preserve this whole normality in the house and the habit of trying and actually for a long time tried to pretend I didn't have children. So I always tried to have a room that didn't look like there was any children in the house, but that's just nonsense, and you realise that. But it was just so nice that somebody told you that at the start. So anyway, now in Scotland we have a play strategy. I'm not going to talk a lot about it. Go online and look at it. It's fantastic. It's one of these lovely presented, well-written documents. There's a vision and value in play every day, and it's got an action plan, and we've got an implementation group. We've got a new worker starting, Deborah Hay, who's coming to us on a secondment from the lottery to help implement a lot of fantastic actions from that. And it will make a big difference in Scotland, but it will only make a difference if it actually makes a difference at grassroots level. There's no point in having all these nice aspirational documents, glossy, colourful, if actually they don't do something on the ground. So they're only there really as a tool to help us on the road. There's a nice synergy in Scotland in terms of policy. A lot of the language that we like to use in our sector in play about well-being and resilience, having physical literacy in children, you know, that hand-eye coordination, the ball skills that kids picked up from playing on the streets, that's all gone. You know, Sports Scotland is saying we can't put kids into teams anymore aged 8 because they haven't got the skills that traditionally they might have had previously. So we've got Active Scotland now, we've got a youth strategy, we've got a parenting strategy, and a lot of synergy around the language there, which is very helpful. What we're trying to do is, this is a quote, a lovely quote from the general comment 17, and talking about play generating a culture of childhood. And that's very much what we aspire to in Play Scotland, is about trying to bring that culture of children being visible and valued into the heart of communities again. Because when they have a healthy, vibrant culture, I think it permeates to ourselves as well. But it is so worrying, you know. I can't help giving the downside to the upside, you know. I remember talking about this dreadful area, Selby, near Leeds, where somebody was selling their house, and the estate agent said, you know, the noise from that school playground's not good, you know, it'll not help the price of your house. So they went to the school and complained about the noise coming from the school playground. And you can look this up online as well. So PTA got together and spent really valuable money that they had fundraised to put up sound barriers around the playground. So what happened, I'm sure there's people in this room who are better, you know, at physics and all the sciences than I am. It actually augmented the noise in the playground. Yes. So more complaints, more people want to put their house up for sale. So then they decided to ban playing in the playground. Children could go out in 1s and 2s, similar to prison yard, and walk round quietly. So there was just mass outrage from those of us, and it was overturned. But the Children's Commissioner of Scotland can tell you he's sitting with about 20 complaints from people in Scotland about the noise from playgrounds. So once we start to think that's a problem, we have a problem, a serious problem. Okay, we'll have to fly through some of these. This is my twin boys, they're now 15, so we have got through lots of different phases, but this was when we had to have hens. And the point of this is the importance of place is everything, I would suggest. Play is important, inequality is a barrier as well. But place is the solution. I would suggest to everybody that place is the solution that we've actually never managed to articulate and plan for sufficiently, and we haven't had the powers for it, we haven't had the ambition, we haven't had the animation from the community. But I would suggest that so many things are coming together now in Scotland at the right time. But just to say, what I normally say when I show this slide is that there is a space standard in Europe for hens. So we can't have battery-reared hens anymore. We have to have free-range hens. There's a space standard in Europe for cows, but we don't have a space standard for children. Now, what we do have at the moment, and after today, when you're all sitting down tonight, and maybe you want to go on the computer, get in touch with somebody, Skype, don't go in and look at NHS Scotland consultations, and there's a consultation on the place standard out at the moment. What is it that we want in a place standard in Scotland? And have your input. Have a couple of glasses of wine, just go for it and say what you think should be in it. But you'll be so full of great ideas from being out in the wood today, and put in there what makes a good place. Because if we have a good place, then it's a good place for all of us. And then ultimately, it's a good place for our children to grow up. Okay, this is the Maryhill Road in the Olympic Games in 1972. And this is what we did as kids. You know, you saw matches, you played. I drove in here today, and I couldn't believe it. You know, there's a whole bit you come in with bricks. And it was a sunny, dry Saturday morning. Where were the kids? Why were the kids not clambering all over? Is it a house that's been dropped there? Or is there something about to be built? But there was nobody there playing with it. I couldn't believe it, you know. So I'm not suggesting, by the way, that we need to go back to a golden era. You know, that we need to live in the real world. I'm not saying let's get the mattresses out on the streets. But have a look at this. Now I want you to think back now, it was to your play memory at the start, your favourite place to play. And then you look at that, and then just think what I was talking about, prison yards, walking around in ones and twos, overlooked. Now, in the Scandinavian countries, they have a concept, when they design new spaces, they have overlooked play spaces. And that's so parents, carers can look out the window, check kids are all right in the play space. That's not what they have. So when you look at, just look at the fencing, you just think of the money that went into the fencing there, the money that went into that rubberized surface, and everything that children, when you ask children, and I'm going to come to a few things that children say they like playing with, everything we might want to play with as children is outside that fence. But that's a very expensive playground in Edinburgh. Nobody was asked, by the way, what they wanted there. If you contrast that, and this is ROSPA, you know, we associate ROSPA with trying to eliminate risk, and you know, it's the Royal Society for Prevention of Accidents, and they're saying children need wilder places to play where they can take risks. And you don't need to be an expert, you don't even need to know a child to even think, where is the play value between those two areas? Which one has the more play value? This is a really nice playground in Stirling, just showing that it doesn't have to be the way it was there. This is Postle Park 2 weeks ago. There was a consultation going on in Postle Park about if we could get a play ranger project, what the children might like, and this is just some of their comments. It's not safe to go out on our own because we live next to a main road. If we had a play ranger, they would make sure we're safe. I'd like to climb trees, build dens and have fun. And I might need to tell you what Clarissa said there. I don't know how easy it is to read on there, but what Clarissa was saying is, she's age 10 and she wanted birdhouses, dens, grow more grass, stroke flowers, clean up for play in area. So she's not asking for rubberized surfaces or fencing or metal equipment, just pointing that out. And this one I might need to read off the script as well here. So I'd like to make, in fact it's taken that out, a tree house den we could hide from some people. Now, I'm trying to make a point here. I think children love to hide and should be allowed to hide. Making dens, like this. But they need to hide because they want to be away from us. I don't want children to hide because they're scared. But we did a lot of comments back from Postle Park, and a very strong sense that children are scared. They're scared to go out. Their parents are scared to let them out. So this is a barrier that we need to help overcome as well. It's not just the parents, it's not just the traffic, it's not just stranger danger, it is the media. We are scared, we are a scared community, but we can't sleepwalk into reading children in captivity. Okay, we can't, we have to give ourselves a reality check and come out of this. And we're all guilty of it. I'm not blaming out there, I'm as guilty of it too. A lot of support now, because what we actually want to rear are competent children. Nearly finished. If it needs to be that we have a lovely community room that you have here and we do structured play, that's great, so long as we actually make that something children want to do and they get to experience the elements. As children, these are hard hats at a building site, I think. But what we can't do is pretend we don't know about the weather in Scotland, so it's really important that you know, that we make it possible for children to play out. And they will play out. But how many of us say, oh, come on, it's raining outside? How many times have I said it myself? To relate it to anti-poverty, in Scotland, play is part of the anti-poverty agenda. So they have a play sufficiency duty in Wales. And what it's saying is, apparently they're playing it during the Timothy advert here. I didn't realise this. I had a photographer to take lots of nice pictures of children playing, and they did this, and I had a heart attack because I thought they were ruining my pictures. So you can walk the walk, you know, or talk the talk, but sometimes you really have to get into their heads. So they're playing it during Timothy, and I'll show you what they did next. But what I want to say here is all children. Children in more affluent communities get driven everywhere. They get taken to activities. They have no time. They are impoverished because they have no time, no opportunity to play. And that has a massive impact. So it's from all social, cultural, economic backgrounds. But what the duty in Wales is about is sufficiency. Is there enough, and is it good enough? And I think that's very important that we hold on to that. So this is what they did next. And I just want to draw your attention to the Children and Young People Act, because it's an act, it's 2014, and it's based on a child's right to play. It's based on a rights-based narrative. And under the Shinari indicators, play is referenced under active, achieving and inclusive. We know they're actually part of all the indicators, but it's really nice to see it highlighted in the Children's Act and in the narrative that isn't exclusively about education, that children need to play to learn. Children need to play to live. Thank you.
Observations really. One is I was incensed when my school wouldn't let my child out to play in the snow.
Yes.
That was the most fun thing to do as a child, was to make a slide on the playground and we'd all be running, you know. So whilst there is maybe, you know, a Play Scotland, sorry, not a Play Scotland, I mean there's an agenda, the council still have such risk-averse strategies that, you know,
yeah.
so that's one comment. And the other one, just that bit at the end you were saying, you know, driving our children around to activities everywhere, it almost implies that the richer you are, the worse off your children are going to be. And yet we often think of inequality as the other way around, but maybe
yeah.
actually people who don't have a car and they can't go to all activities, maybe they're having a better time.
We call it, we're doing a lot of work on it in Northern Ireland, we call it affluence deprivation.
Yeah.
So it is something to bear in mind. We're not always doing our kids a favour when we're, oh, it's raining, I'll run you down to whatever, do you know, we're not doing that good. Grounds for learning. In Scotland they're doing some great work in school playgrounds. I saw a great playground, is it, in the school just there?
That's the same with Seal, yeah.
It's got a fantastic one there, yeah. So, but it's coming on board. PTA need to get close to the school to achieve these things.
I don't know if anyone else has had a whole riot of memories from childhood recently. You were talking, but one of mine, which I want to share with everyone, is that one of the favourite corners of our school playground in Stornoway was a disused air raid shelter, and our favourite game was jumping off the air raid shelter. There was a high bit and a lower bit, and the really tough people jumped off the high bit. But this boy called Hugh Stratton landed on his face and spent a fortnight covered in horrible green ointment until he had to come to school like that. We all laughed at him. That's the sort of thing.
But you learn to manage risk, and
The teachers didn't bother.
no, what the health and safety executive is saying is, what kind of people are we going to have in the workplace if they've never played out and managed risk and learned to manage their own risk? But I would go back to what Bill was saying this morning. We need to try and look at things differently. Is it going to be a workplace in the future? If people are actually always going to work from home and they never went out to play, I mean, we are social animals. So the implications of this are enormous, and I think the importance of having legacies like the Children's Wood here are so important, because yes, it's nice to have a playground or the botanic gardens or a building site to play on, but we do need these natural wild spaces for our health and well-being and our creativity. And so it just means, I couldn't stress enough how important it is that we have them. And I slightly worry about there's two new pieces of legislation coming in just to finish. The Community Empowerment Bill, which is fantastic because it puts a duty on community planning partnerships now to plan with people, you know, what the priorities are in areas, not for people in local authorities and health boards to decide what the priorities are. So that Community Empowerment Bill, and we give a lot of evidence to it, we were asked to give a lot of evidence to it. But the other thing is the Land Reform Act. And one of the things, the proposals there, is that people can actually buy small pieces of ground. And I would be actually so against that in urban areas, because the responsibility of a community owning a piece of ground is massive. And I think it should be for local authorities still to have that. And there's another organisation, Fields and Trust, that do take on fields and help keep them into perpetuity and protect them. But I think we need to have better protection. Protection can't be that a community has to take on the response. It's enough to take on maybe looking after it and making sure it's used and looked after and whatever. But I think we have to think very carefully, because what happens if communities start to buy bits of land, they can very quickly become blights, and then everybody's glad that they're built on. So you end up with an unintended consequence there, do you know? So I just think we need to be very intelligent about what we do, to use the intelligence that we have. And to go back to Postle Park, you know, where I researched a wee bit about Postle Park recently, and they're saying, I think in 1872 there was 10 people lived in Postle Park, and in 10 years' time, or 20 years' time, there was 20,000 people living there. And the actual intelligence that went into the grid that created and designed Postle Park was fantastic. It was one of the best designed spaces ever. So if they had that intelligence, you know, at the end of the 19th century, we have to have more. I would suggest we've got better intelligence, more informed intelligence. So why is it that we can't seem to design better places for people, communities to live in and grow up and thrive, so that everybody is visible and valued and feels safe to go out there? So I think we've got it, but we're just sleepwalking into not using it, whether we're trained by the media or the politicians or whatever it is to think that we can't do it. I would say to people we can do it, and I think the legislation and a lot of the policy is with us, but it's still us that has to make the difference. We can't rely on other people doing it for us. It's up to yourselves.